Alright, this is a demo of the new NJTopps Soccode and Soccode import. It's the import utility provided through the administration interface, and it's also going to be a demo of the front-end changes so that people can search for specific sockcodes and also for subcodes or programs that are selected as in demand that are associated with these new sockcodes, these occupational codes. So in order to get to the administration interface, you would go to NJTopps.com and you would log in using the secure URL. And this is being done in the development environment right now, so the URLs will look a little bit different up top, but it's basically the same as when it'll be deployed to production. So I log in with my credentials and I'm in. The new administration pages for the Soccode import are under System Manager, and there's a new little tab for Soccode. The interface is going to be very similar to the Green Jobs update that was done a while ago. So we split it up into 3 different pages. There's Import Sockcodes, there's List of Sockcodes, and there's Soccode and SIP-code relationships. So we'll start with importing a new set of sockcodes. The instructions are to import a CSV file only. It does not accept Excel files, just CSV. You can always save an Excel file to CSV using Excel. And this little grid here shows you what the specifications are for that CSV file. So, for instance, for the soccode file, only soccode file, you have to have soccode, OCC title, and in demand. And then when you import the soccode SIP-code relationship file, you have to have the soccode and SIP-code. To get an idea of what the first file, the soccode only file, looks like, this is a CSV Excel file. So we have a column for soccode, a column for OCC title, and a column for in demand. So this should all be available from the file that's downloaded from the other site that contains all the lists. It might need to be trimmed out, the columns that you don't need, but the program actually specifically looks for these column names. And so if you have additional columns in your data set in your Excel file, CSV file, it's not a problem as long as these columns are present. So the title, the column name is very important. It has to be exactly as described in that instructions panel behind, and also as you see in the Excel chart here. So the soccode would be some sort of number, alphanumeric. The OCC title would be the pretty name, the display name of the actual job, the occupational title, and then an indicator, which is 1 or 0, 1 for yes, 0 for no, of whether or not that occupational title is in demand. Once you have a file that you're ready to import, you choose what type of import you want to do. You have soccode or soccode, SIP-code crosswalk. We're going to do soccode first since we don't have any import yet. Click Choose File. We'll find the file. So I have in my downloads file soccode import. I have file number 1 here, test soccode import. Select that and select import file, and we'll see that it successfully imported the file with a little nice green message. The next import we want to do is the soccode SIP-code crosswalk. That file looks like the following. The sockcodes are listed in here, and then it has for each soccode relationship, there's a pair of the soccode to an actual SIP-code. When you import this table specifically, this CSV file, it's important that the SIP codes actually do exist, and also that the sockcodes also do exist. And the program will generate warnings and allow you to skip non-critical warnings if it finds that some sockcodes that you're trying to import are not actually do not actually exist, and likewise for the soccode stuff. But the critical errors are more like if the columns themselves don't have the right name, so it couldn't find the soccode column, or it couldn't find the SIP-code column, or other critical errors like that. But it should always be try to import without generating any sort of errors or warnings, and the program should just import it fine. So we'll assume that this file is correct, and we'll just go ahead and update it, import it. So we choose the file. So this is the test soccode is SIP-code import, the crosswalk. Hit import file, and it says CSV file. CSV successfully imported, so it's done. To confirm that we actually did upload this stuff is we use the other tabs. So the second page that was created administration page is list of sockcodes. So this page shows you that you can create, this shows you what sockcodes are currently imported into the database, and also how you can start administrating, updating each one, and you can also add new ones. So this is basically so you can administer your sockcodes without having to completely do a new import every time. So once you do the import, from then on you can administer them one at a time using this interface. So for example, if I want to change something so that it's not in demand, I can go to, for instance, S1, which is the sockcode, click on it, and then I can't change the sockcode number, alphanumeric number, but I can change the title. I can also specify that it's not in demand. I uncheck the checkbox and hit save, and we'll see in the list that it is not in demand anymore. And then I can turn it back on by clicking the box and hitting save. I can also delete it, which will delete the sockcode, and if there is a relationship with a zip code, it'll delete that relationship. It won't actually delete the zip code or any programs that use that zip code. I could also create a new one if I want to, and then at this time I can put in a sockcode number, and then I can also put in a test title, and then I can say it's in demand, and that's how you add new ones. Now once you add the new sockcode, you have to crosswalk it to a zip code. So the third administration page that was created does that very thing. Up top you have a list of all the existing sockcodes that are in the system in a drop-down list. You choose the one that you want to administer the crosswalk. So for instance, S1 is the first sockcode I'll administer here, and you see in the list automatically it's selected which zip codes are associated with that sockcode. If you want to change this, you can choose some other SIPs that are associated, and you want to have that crosswalk, and you can check the boxes and you can hit save, and it should say sockcode zip code updated. You can choose to make other relationships as well. So for instance, for S3 we can uncheck accounting, and then we can check acoustics, acting, actuarial science, and hit save. Also, when you're administrating these, you can change the order in which the zip codes are sorted by either displaying them by display name or by the zip code itself, and then it'll rearrange the list. The checkboxes that are checked should have been preserved. It's hard to find because there they are, because this is a very long list, but there they are. It should be noted that because of the .NET version of this application being .NET 1.1 or 1.0, we can't upgrade it at this time due to time and budget. But because of the .NET version, you cannot select all zip codes like this and hit save. It would throw an error at the server level. This probably wouldn't be done anyway, but it doesn't mean that you can't submit all the records like being checked at one time. But it's not just all, it's actually because too many of these items are submitted, and there's some sort of limitation that was fixed with the subsequent .NET hotfix that we cannot apply because of the version that we're using. So if you have to make a whole lot of zip code checks here, if you have to select a whole lot of zip codes for a sockcode, then I would recommend like doing blocks of 20. Check off 20 of them, hit save, load up the sockcode again, check 20 more, hit save, and so on and so forth. So you can't do it all at one time. It's a limitation, but that's the way to get around it. So that's it for the administration tool. Using these three pages, you can manage the sockcodes that are imported, whether or not those sockcodes are on demand, and you can update the crosswalk as needed as well. Technically speaking, if your import files are correct, then you'll never even need to use the other two pages, list of sockcodes and sockcode and zip code relationships, unless you need to make fine-tune changes later on or additions over time. If you're just going to import it once and be done with it, then you're done. I guess a new case would be if we needed to add a new zip code at some time in the future, or a new sockcode without having to do a whole new import. There's also a utility built into it. On the import sockcodes page, you can restore a previous import. So what happens is every time you do an import, it takes the current data, saves it into a backup table for that particular set of data that you're importing, either sockcodes or sockcode zip code crosswalks, and it backs up that data, and then it'll apply your updates, which basically wipe out the sockcode table when you're importing sockcodes, or the sockcode zip code table when you're importing the relationships, the crosswalks. So this allows you to restore to the very previous, immediate previous import if you find out that your new import had problems and you want to restore functionality so you have time to go back and correct it. It only restores the previous version. It does not restore past the very previous version. So you can't. It's not over time. It's added one more. Every time you do an import, you can always restore back to that import. It only does the last one, and it probably won't be needed unless, again, if there's errors being done when you import. To further explain how the soccode zipcode import process validates the input, I want to go through a couple examples of some bad data in a non-critical sense and some bad data in a critical sense, and how that affects the import process. So first, I want to try to import a soccode table that does not contain all the columns. An example of this would be the soccode import should contain 3 columns. It should contain the soccode alphanumeric ID, it should contain the OCC title, display name, but it also should contain an in-demand field with 0s and 1s indicating if it is indeed on demand, in demand. But you'll notice here that it's missing. So when we go ahead and try to import this by choosing soccode as the import type, finding that file that it should fail, and then clicking import, we'll see that it's a critical error because it's in red and it's at the top, and then doesn't provide you any further functionality. It says the CSV file must contain column named in demand, and that's also explained right up here in the instructions of what columns are required for each import type. So this is a critical error that you cannot continue until you fix your Excel's CSV file. A non-critical error, something that can be skipped, is that I have an example for, is when we do the soccode zipcode crosswalk. Now, it might be common that when you get the file that needs to be imported into the system, the soccode list, and also the soccode zipcode crosswalk, that for some reason that there might be, in the crosswalk table especially, maybe zip codes that we don't have in our system yet, or that were changed over time, or for one reason or another they don't match up with zip codes that we already have in table zipcode. And maybe even that the sockcodes themselves don't match up to the very sockcodes that were imported in like the other sheet in that big spreadsheet that you download from the other site. In that case, I didn't want the application to just not function until you fixed every single thing, because there's like potentially, I guess, thousands of these to be imported, and it would take too much time. So I allowed it to proceed if there's non-critical warnings. So an example of this, let's look at a file, would be file number 4 here. This is the crosswalk, and we see a couple examples of bad data. For example, there's a soccode in here, S999, that does not exist in the soccode table. Also, there's a bad data, record number 6 here, that has a valid soccode, but the zip code I know very well that does not exist. There's no zip code in the system named test123. So I'm gonna go ahead and close the Excel file, and let's actually try to import this guy. So let's choose the import target, which is soccode zipcode crosswalk, and let's go ahead and choose that file and then hit import file. So we see that there's red messages, but there's additional functionality that we can do here. So it gives us a couple of warnings. It says one or more sockcodes included in the CSV file does not exist in the soccode table, and the second warning is one or more zip codes included in the CSV file does not exist in the zip code table. So these are non-critical warnings. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't be fixed potentially, because this means that the data is inconsistent, but it does allow you to continue anyway. So I can choose import file anyway. Nice clear message there. So if I click the button, it says CSV successfully imported. So let's actually look at what the impact of this was. So if I look at the list of sockcodes, this is the list of sockcodes in the system. That didn't change because we didn't actually get to import that soccode CSV file. We were only able to upload the soccode zipcode crosswalk file with the bad data within it. So let's go ahead and look at some of that bad data. So if we choose the soccode and zipcode relationships tab, and we look at the relationships, so let's go ahead and choose S4, and let's see if we can find any relationship here. What should have been in there? Okay, so that actually explains it. We didn't import an S4 relationship, so there is none. Notice that this overwrite the changes that we made before. So when you import a new relationship file, it wipes out all the existing soccode zipcode relationships and rebuilds the new ones. That's something to keep in mind here.